Okay, I'm going to tie a gray nymph. This is specifically for Paul and also my other beginning students, Roy, Shane, and Bryce. And let's get started here. Mount your hook, shank level, barb exposed. Now, on this particular hook, it doesn't have a round bend, so the base of the shank is a little bit forward of the barb. So we're just gonna use the shank and not go into the bend at all. Now I've got two types of feathers. One is a kind of a wet hackle, and that's what I'm going to use for my tail. And I'm going to find places there where the barbs are long, and I'm only going to use about, I don't know, five to 10 barbs. And so stroke it so that the barbs are perpendicular to the stem. And the other feather I'm using is this Brahmin hen hackle. What do we got going here? Yes, and the tip is very nicely patterned. And I'm going to prepare this similar to how I did for my woolly worm. I'm going to hold the tip and I'm going to stroke back the barb so that I expose a little stem, a little bit of wasp waist, and that's where I'm going to tie it on. And I'm only going to use the tiniest a bit of this whole feather, maybe half an inch or less of stem, and all this other stuff, in particular the fuzzy stuff, I can strip away. That'll make it a little bit easier to hold and to tie off. Okay, my muskrat hide is very obviously has some nice fuzzy underfur and some longer, thinner uh, guard hairs, if you will. And those guard hairs were just a tad long for my taste, so but I gave them a trim. They're still longer than the fuzzy stuff, but not an inch and a half, more like twice as long as the fuzz. Now I'm going to cut off a little blob of fur, and that's going to be my dubbing. And so I'm going to start at the corner where the fuzzy stuff overlaps the hide here, and I'm going to cut off a blob. It doesn't really matter how much, however much you cut off will be too much. And I'm going to cut it close to the hide so that next time I cut it, I can cut close to it again. So I think the directions said like an olive size blob. That's going to be a lot. And as I mentioned, this little piece of muskrat fur is going to be your lifetime supply of muskrat dubbing. You will never run out. Now I've got my blob. As I cut it off, I'm going to homogenize it by tearing it in two. Be gentle, don't mat it, and turn it at right angles, and tear it in two again. Turn it in right angles, rotate, kind of do that 7 or 8 times until the fibers go in all different directions and the short and the long hairs are all mixed up. There we go. That's going to be my dubbing. All right, let's start. I'll give you a little more. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm trying to focus. Well, I don't know that I'm gonna. It's probably about the best I'm gonna do here. Okay. Tie on at the 1 eye length point. And thread base to the back of the shank. Come forward a little past the point so you don't nick your thread. Okay, now I'm going to tear off barbs from the grizzly wet fly feather to use as my tail. So orient the barbs, the same way that they're going to go on the hook, namely tips to the back. And I'm only going to use, I don't know, 10 or so, way less than a thumb's width of barbs. And you can cut it or tear it off the stem. And now I'm going to measure them so that I'm going to use these tips are going to be the tips of my tail, and I want them to be approximately three-quarters of the shaft length. So I'll stick the tips such that they're three-quarters of a shaft back from the eye, and then I'm going to grab them with my right or dominant hand, my thumbnail, right at the eye. So what's sticking out from my thumbnail is three-quarters of a shaft length of barbs. Okay, then I'm going to bring my thumbnail to the base of the shank so that again, three-quarters of a length of barbs are sticking out back of the shaft. I'm going to tie it on just like that. So now, without translating, without shifting the barbs relative to the hook, with my other hand, in this case left or a non-dominant hand, I'm going to grab both the barbs and the hook. And with my right hand, I'm going to tie them on so that there's a half to three-quarter length of barbs sticking out the end. I'm going to tie back to the base. Again, I'm going to use gentle pressure up and toward me so that those barbs stay right on top of the hook. They're not going to get torqued around by the thread. And now they're going to set right in line with the hook facing backwards. So that's cool. And if I want to get rid of that butt end, I can, but it really doesn't matter because I'm going to bury that in dubbing. Okay, now the real lesson for today is the dubbing. I mentioned, you might want a wet paper towel there because you need to have kind of the right moisture in your hand, and don't get in the bad habit of me like licking your fingers because that especially these days could be nasty. So I take my prepped little tiny glob of dubbing and I'm going to tease out the finest portion. And however much you tease out, that's going to be too much, okay? The tiniest little bit. Now I mentioned you can test that by taking that tiny blob and dropping it if it falls down, it's too much. If it kind of wafts a little in the non-existent breeze, then that's about right. So take the finest little piece, and stretch it into a line. And now I'm going to use my thumb and, index, second, third, fourth finger, and I'm going to twist it around the thread. And I'm going to twist it in a clockwise motion from the top so that my thumb's going toward the back of the hook and my fingers are going toward the front. I'm not going to twist it back and forth, only in one direction. If I can do it all in one little twist, I'm going to twist and squeeze all at one time so that I'm coating the thread. So, I was having black thread and now it's kind of black thread coated with fuzzy gray stuff, which is a mixture of the short and the long hairs from the muskrat. And, I'll do that a little more until I got, I don't know, an inch or two of coated thread, dubbed thread. Just the tiniest amounts. Okay, now we're ready to start dubbing our body. Now I do have a little bit of bare thread here, so I'm going to wrap back such the start of the dubbing starts at the base of the shank. And then I'm going to start wrapping forward tightly in touching turns and going toward the 1 eye length point. It's looking good, but I'm going to run out of dubbing. That's cool. Better to add more than to use too much and take it off. And stop before I get to the bare thread so that I can dub some more on the thread. Squeeze it on there, twist it one direction. Make your thread coated with gray fuzzy stuff. And then keep going. Dub it on the thread, wind it on the shaft. Now when I get to the a 1 eye length point, or 1 to 1/2, or between 1 and 1.5 eye length, I will have kind of a nice gray fuzzy cylindrical body. And what I want is a kind of a cigar-shaped body. So I'll get 2 to 1 eye length, and then I'll come back a little to make it tapered such that it's thicker, not in the middle, but a little bit toward the front. Remember, I'm leaving at least a 1/2 of an eye length of bare hook there. Okay, and I'm going to wrap back to make it a little bit thicker in the middle. And that should do it for me. You know, there's a little bit sticking out there, but that's good. Okay, so there. It's a little bit thicker, a little tiny bit cigar shape. You know, insect bodies are thin. I kind of like that. I'll half hitch there. Wind up. And that's my body. Now I can trim. If things are sticking out too much, I can trim. Here's where a rotary or a vise that you can turn around might be helpful. This is not one, but no problem. Just trim front and top so that not too much is sticking out. Okay, and now I'm going to spin my hackle, and there's a lot happening in that last 1/2 of an eye length point. And here it is. Okay, so again, I'm going to place my hackle so that that exposed bare stem is right on the shank, about between the 1/2 and the 1 eye length point. And I'm going to catch it. I'm going to take a nice tight wrap or two. Cut off that tip. A few fibers sticking out there. I don't want that. Cut them off. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to have to spin that hackle. My hackle pliers might come in handy here. Now, Shane saw me already destroy one piece of hackle with too much tension, so I'll be a little careful here. The directions say 2 to 3 turns, at least, even 1 will do. And I want all the barbs to be kind of going back toward the hook, so I'm going to get them started and, kind of push them back, and that'll get them out of the way. I'm going to take like 1 whole turn, and if I want to stroke those barbs back, I can, another. Okay. And I'm almost done. Almost done spinning my hackle. I'll go overboard here. A little will work. Good. Now, continuing to keep a tiny bit of tension here with my right or dominant hand, take my left hand or non-dominant hand, flop it over. So now I've caught the stem. I can release it. I can take another, like a super tight turn, super tight wrap, and cut that stem right off. Make a tiny, tiny little tapered head. Now, one thing I'm going to do when I make my head is going to stroke all of those barbs back, and I'm actually going to take a wrap on top of the barbs, not very far, just like a thread's width, but right on top, so that they're actually going to be, forced to angle back. So yeah, kind of streamline there. Oh, that's it. Little tiny head. Finish off with 2 or 3 half hitches, or if you like, you can do a whip finish. That's it. Cut it close. one drop of head cement on that little head. And I am done. Did I get any head cement in my eye? If so, take a little piece of stem and barb or whatever. Poke it out there and clean it out. That's it. Okay. Hope that helps.